the size of the African market in 3 dimensions, mobilizing prices. And this is where I'm agreeing with Mahama when he said this. $50 billion. Mahama is pushing our leaders a lot. Thank you so much for joining Official Survivor. Yeah, you'll never be disappointed. We make sure that we got you covered, solidly. African leaders are taking certain decisions which, when you look at it, they are practically sanctioning the West. I'm telling you the truth. Now they are all awake suddenly because of what Trump is doing, the initiative of Trump trying to seize or freeze aid to Africa and other nations. Today's episode is centered around the 38th African Union Summit, which happened at the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, from February 15th to 16, 2025. And not only the African Union Summit, but we will blend it with a short clip of John Dramani Mahama's speech at the African Prosperity Dialogue, where in the speech he was practically calling African leaders to sanction the West by taking charge of their own resources for the benefit of their people. Now, this gathering brings together African leaders, head of state, government from all over the 50, I think some people say 54, 55, whatever it is. Let me put it this way. 55 AU member countries to deliberate on pressing issues affecting our continent. The summit has 2 phases. I summarize everything in this single video for you instead of you going to watch, 30-minute, 40-minute video to try to understand everything. No. Let me make it simple and easy for you to understand. And lovely people, do me a favor by just clicking on the like button so that you support me. That's the best support you can give me. And also, if you're not part of the family, just make sure you subscribe. All right. The summit centered around the theme justice for Africans. Yeah, justice, not just fee. Forgive me. So justice for Africans and people of Africa descend through reparations. But as it looks and sounds like the meeting is all about reparation of slavery and whatever it is, the truth is the summit is addressing 3 key issues so far as Africa is concerned. And reparation is part of it though. And John Dramani Mahama made amazing remarks when it comes to reparation. I have my view on reparation, but I agree with him in a way.
It is an appeal to ensure that the dignity, rights, and well-being of Africans and their descendants are fully restored. Reparations involves not only financial compensation, but also restitution, rehabilitation, and guarantees of non-repetition for the abuse of fellow human beings. It is also about truth-telling, historical accountability, and the restoration of agency to those who have been marginalized for centuries. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the call for reparations, while including, extends beyond financial redress to encompass addressing structural inequalities, ensuring educational and economic opportunities, reclaiming cultural heritage, and amplifying the voice of Africa and the diaspora communities on the global stage.
So the summit focused on 3 key issues: a revisit to the injustice committed against Africa, the security issues confronting Africa, and addressing the sudden freezing of US aid. As a matter of fact, some of the discussions will never come on board if Donald Trump didn't take these decisions of freezing aid to Africans. That is the fact. The suspension of US aid funding has prompted African leaders to critically assess the continent's dependency on foreign aid. This is what we have been calling on for a long time, but now that there's a shift from the United States, they are now reasoning. If you not wake up, be sleeping. They are all awake. Everybody who is dreaming, all the African leaders dreaming, all of them are awake. And I was a little bit surprised that the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres was at the AU summit, and he delivered a very shocking and questionable remark.
The world must never forget that Africa is the victim of 2 colossal and compounded injustices. First, the profound impact of colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade. The roots stretch back centuries, and the bitter fruit continues to affect Africans and people of African descent to this day. Decolonization alone in itself was not a panacea. Political independence did not free countries from structures based on exploitation and decades of economic, social, and institutional underinvestment. It is high time for reparatory justice frameworks to be put in place.
I said it is questionable because, as usual, anytime African leaders are trying to break away from these Western shackles, then you see the Western leaders coming on board to speak the language of Africans and trying to sympathize with us kind of vibe and to buy them back through a different means. So let's first of all look at the 4 key agenda items of the first phase of the summit. Then we move forward to the second phase. I'll make it short, I promise you. Number 1 thing that happened at the summit was election of EU Commission leadership. Djibouti's foreign minister Mahmoud Ali Yusuf has been elected as the new chairperson of the African Union Commission. So this particular guy, who is the Djibouti's foreign minister, he served as foreign minister since 2005 and wonderfully elected during the summit. And additionally, elections are also being held for the deputy chairperson and 6 commissioners. And these individuals will be committed to advancing the AU's strategic objectives for the continent of Africa. Now, the second thing that happened also is the peace and security deliberation. The ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, particularly the activity of M23 fighters. They are calling them rebels. Of course, we can say they rebel against the government, but they are not rebels as in terrorists, all right? So this discussion at the meeting focused on, trying to solve the situation in Congo. And they are doing everything possible to de-escalate the conflict so that it should not become a regional conflict. It should not extend to Rwanda and like what they are trying to put on board. Because when you look at the conflict in DRC, it's kind of like trying to hoover around, everybody, Uganda, Rwanda, and pulling everybody in. No, they're trying to, find ways and means to solve the situation and prevent it from escalating. And wonderfully, the summit addressed the situation in Sudan, and they come to the conclusion that they need to find ways and means to collaborate with the international community to stop or to halt the flow of weapons and support to Sudan or the terrorists out there or whatever it is, to maintain peace. And I have a problem with this. I don't know why our leaders are still calling cooperation of international community for the fight against terrorism when part of their aid is said in the news these days that they are using it to sponsor these people. Even they say they are sponsoring Boko Haram. They said it. I'm not the one who said it. Yeah. I know many of you, we watch the news. Boko Haram is being sponsored by the aid. And later they'll come out and tell us they'll establish their peace, UN peace and whatever. But meanwhile, you are the same people sponsoring that. So I don't know why our leaders are not waking up to understand that they need to handle the situation themselves. They are still giving room for the international community, the same people who are the cause of the problem. Our leaders, sometimes they are funny guys, And the third thing that happened is economic development and integration. African continental free trade era. The African leaders are evaluating the progress of the African free trade, which is popularly known as the intra-African trade, which is very, very important to us. They discuss about infrastructure development and economic integration to stimulate sustainable growth across the entire continent. And lovely people, we must put it on record that this is the first time our leaders are coming to discuss issues like this genuinely. And I have so much interest in this area. The African market is massive and has immense potential, especially if the intra-African trade is strengthened and completely implemented. It will benefit us and make us powerful if we trade among ourselves freely. Let me show you the size of the African market in 3 dimensions. Number 1, population. Africa, we have over 1.4 billion people. It is projected to reach 2.5 billion by 2050, making it one of the most fastest growing consumer markets in the world. We are only consuming. We need to start producing now. And number 2 is economy. Africa's total GDP is around $3.1 trillion, with economies like Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt leading the continent. Number 3, you have youth demography. More than 60% of Africa's population is under 25, meaning a growing workforce and rising demand for goods and services. Africa could add $450 billion to its economy by 2035 through this reform. Are you aware that Africa imports $50 billion worth of food annually? Food, despite having fertile lands everywhere, vast land. $50 billion. If we increase regional trade, it will help Africa farmers access larger markets, reducing food shortages and stabilizing prices. And this is where I'm agreeing with Mahama when he said this.
Creating a prosperous and self-sufficient Africa. Our continent, Africa, is at a crossroads. On one hand, we boast of immense natural wealth, a youthful and dynamic population, and growing technological advancement. On the other hand, we continue to grapple with economic disparities, infrastructure deficits, and structural barriers that impede our forward movement. But the good news is that our destiny is in our own hands. The actions that we take today through decisive leadership and strategic partnerships will define the future of this dear continent of ours. One of the most transformative initiatives of our time is the African Continental Free Trade Area. It has the potential to create the largest free trade area in the world. And the African Continental Free Trade Area represents a game-changing opportunity for African businesses, entrepreneurs, and industries. However, trade liberalization in itself is not enough. We must invest in infrastructure to facilitate trade, efficient road, rail networks, ports, and digital connectivity. We must strengthen African supply chains to ensure that our industries produce goods and services that meet both regional and global standards. We must harmonize our trade policies to eliminate non-tariff barriers and reduce the cost of doing businesses across borders. We must fast-track the full operationalization of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System to facilitate the payment for goods and services across our continent. If we commit to these actions, we can unlock a $3.4 trillion market, creating jobs and prosperity for millions of Africans across this continent. We must indigenize ownership of our natural resources. There's capital and technology available to us today to increase our participation in the exploitation of our natural resources. Our governments must therefore work hand in hand with the private sector to drive industrialization through special economic zones that encourage manufacturing and innovation, access to finance for small and medium-sized enterprises, which are the backbone of our economies.
Yeah, so guys, we heard him. That is, very simple. Mahama is pushing our leaders a lot. He's coming, it's like pushing a lot of things that connect with Pan-Africanism, what we want to see. Now, that is the first phase of the summit. The second phase, which...
To be continued with second phase in next video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and like to stay connected.